Less vigorous have built the office position of power and prestige. First to shape the office was George Washington in 1789, beginning the job of uniting 13 states into a nation.
The President shall be called Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, have power, with advice and consent of the Senate, to make treaties, appoint judges of the Supreme Court, shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed.
The new president's duties, outlined by the Founding Fathers, had to be translated into everyday detail. Could Washington make the Constitution work? History waited on this one man. Now to make it work. Details of presidential protocol had to be worked out in practice. Washington's first personal appearance in the Senate was a stormy one. It convinced him the president had to act independently of Congress, strengthening the separation of powers. Washington's action was decisive in large affairs. When Congress created the first 3 executive departments, the president appointed Jefferson, Hamilton, and Knox to head them. Their conferences brought the cabinet system into being.
Against a particular body. This is the first step to tyranny.
Gentlemen, gentlemen. Mr. Jefferson, too strict an interpretation of my constitutional authority does not enable me to make this government work. This government must have funds to operate. Can't we agree on the necessity of a whiskey tax to raise revenue?
Mr. President, we can't deprive these people of their livelihood to strengthen the central power.
I regret that I must agree with Colonel Hamilton. This refusal by Western farmers to pay the tax is a challenge to our new government.
Putting down the Whiskey Rebellion, Washington showed that the federal government was strong enough to enforce its authority. Washington's decision to retire after 2 terms set another precedent. His final accomplishments, an effective executive, a strong, functioning federal government. Though he could still say in his farewell address, the basis of our political system is the right of the people to make and alter their constitutions of government. After Washington, other strong presidents added to the power of the office. Among them, Thomas Jefferson, who feared strong government, yet was wise enough to use presidential power to acquire an empire. His decision to purchase the Louisiana Territory from Napoleon affirmed for all time immense presidential powers in the shaping of foreign policy. As the nation grew, the work of the federal government and the responsibilities of its chief executive had to keep pace. The common man was winning the right to vote, demanding a more popular government, till suddenly in the 1850s, democracy faced the ordeal of secession and civil war. Abraham Lincoln faced the greatest crisis in the nation's history. To meet it, he made the boldest use of presidential power. At the moment of inauguration, Fort Sumter was under siege. Lincoln made a fateful decision. He would send relief to Sumter's garrison. The South gave its answer. Pressing ahead of a frightened Congress, Lincoln wielded power vigorously. He called for 75,000 voluntary enlistments, ordered a blockade of the entire Confederate coast, assumed personal direction of the armed forces, banned Northern papers criticizing the war effort, and, in defiance of the courts, suspended habeas corpus. Enemies in Congress were outraged.
The Constitution does not say that the President has the right to declare martial law.
I'd like to read this statement, gentlemen, if I may. I think the man whom, for the time, the people have under the Constitution made the Commander-in-Chief of their Army and Navy bears the responsibility for making this decision.
It was virtually government by presidential decree. But Lincoln's bold executive leadership saved the Union. With peace came great national changes, speedy national growth, America in an age of reckless industrial expansion, of colonial empire, of growing power in world affairs. Of Teddy Roosevelt, talking trust-busting, wielding the big stick in foreign affairs. But it fell to Woodrow Wilson to meet America's new problems most boldly. For the first time since George Washington, a president went to Congress in person to propose a program, then drove through sweeping reform measures. Suddenly, World War flared. Now, a president again assumed vast wartime powers, taking command of every phase of national life: industry, labor, agriculture, press, and public opinion. A nation wholly mobilized under the president's leadership. Wilson captured the moral leadership of the world with his 14 points. Then, armistice. And for the first time in history, an American president stood on foreign soil, fashioning a blueprint for world settlement, gaining worldwide prestige for the presidency. Now the boom years, years of national prosperity building to dizzy heights, till suddenly the dream collapsed into depression. March 1933. A president faced greater responsibility than any chief executive ever had in peacetime. A frightened Congress rushed through sweeping legislation to combat the Depression. The executive branch doubled, then tripled in size. In 1939, a second world war broke out. In the approaching crisis, the American people broke with tradition to elect Roosevelt for a third term. When war came, the nation backed Congress, granting the president stupendous executive powers. Powers far exceeding those earlier assumed by Lincoln or granted to Wilson. Under presidential command, all the nation's production. Under command of the president, all manpower. Strict controls over civilian prices and goods. Under the commander-in-chief, the hugest war machine we have ever had, and the president personally engaged in the making of important military decisions, dealing with our allies and negotiating the final settlement when victory. In today's unquiet peace, the man of the hour on Inauguration Day faces far greater responsibilities than earlier presidents. The march of events has made the White House the hub of national and world affairs. The man who sits at the president's desk has heavier duties and more power than almost any other individual on earth. For he's the freely chosen leader of the American people. A great nation and a good part of the world look to him for action on a host of problems. The president is chief of a vast executive establishment, headed up by the 10 heads of departments who sit here as his cabinet. Appointing and removing cabinet members and other top-level officials is one of the president's most important executive tasks.
Well, this is the statement, boys. The president has just sent to the Senate the appointment of James S. Bostwick for Secretary of Interior. Any questions?
The scope of his responsibilities is symbolized in the panorama of the nation's capital, where massive structures house the executive agencies. From the Pentagon building, center of the armed forces, to the new department concerned with the health, education, and welfare of citizens. From the agency devoted to the progress and prosperity of the nation's farmers, to the State Department, concerned with foreign affairs. These but a few of the manifold activities carried on by more than 2 million federal employees. Their work directed from the executive wing of the White House. Within these solemn premises, a busy corps of presidential assistants and aides works night and day to keep the executive machinery running. The president handles major matters of policy in cabinet meetings and in conferences with top-level people in Congress and the executive agencies.
How's the president, Mr. Secretary? Have you any statement to make?
Sorry, boys, no comment.
Hey, how about it, Mr. Secretary? Anything new on the St. Lawrence Waterway project?
Sorry, no comment. Except that I can say that the president and I are in complete agreement on what action to take. That's complete agreement.
From the president's desk come executive orders covering a wide range of federal activity.
The President directs that the United States Commission for the St. Lawrence Waterway shall consist of 5...
The President directs that in accordance with the powers granted him under the Tariff Law of 1948, schedules on hides from Brazil shall be reduced by...
The president directs that the Division of Information of this department be abolished, and its function to be assigned to a new division to be termed the...
But the duties of the president are more than executive. Americans look to him to provide Congress and the nation with a program of legislation.
The prosperity of American business? Why, that's up to the president.
Sure, but so is the welfare of labor.
Don't forget the farmers. He's got to help us.
Taxes. That's the big issue. The president's got to cut them down.
And what about keeping the peace? That's up to the president, too.
While making the laws of the land is chiefly the responsibility of the people's representatives in Congress, the president has enormous influence in the work of Congress. A major act of the president is to deliver his State of the Union message to a joint session of both houses. In this and later messages, he proposes a program of legislation.
Among the specific recommendations in his message today, the President urged legislation for public school construction. He said, among other things, the schools...
The President's proposals are introduced into Congress by his friends. But he generally faces strong opposition.
The office he holds. Gentlemen, I am opposed to taking any action on this bill until such time as this committee has given a more thorough study. We cannot let the president dictate to us about this school building program anymore.
The president has a number of ways of winning support. For one thing, he can appeal to party loyalty.
All right, I got it for you. At his press conference today, the president said pointedly that the school building program is one of the most vital proposals before the Congress today. Yeah, that's right. Now, he urged all the members of the administration party to get behind it.
The president also urges his program in personal meetings with congressional leaders.
Yes. The president talked to us for a half hour at least about this school building bill. He's hot about it.
The president can bring pressure on congressmen through his power over appointments. But the president's most effective weapon is the direct appeal for public support.
The appropriation of federal funds for public school construction is just one of the measures we propose for assistance to education. So
finally, when Congress passes a measure, the president enters directly into lawmaking. He can veto bills which go to him for signature. But if he signs a bill or fails to veto it, it becomes law. To veto, the president returns the bill to Congress with his objections.
Gentlemen, this is the text of the president's veto message on the River and Harbors bill.
Is there any news about the school building bill?
No. But off the record, he'll sign it when it comes to it.
But of course, Congress can override the veto by a two-thirds vote. Despite frequent clashes between president and Congress, the president holds a position of powerful leadership. Citizens regard him as their personal spokesman.
Dear Mr. President, I just want to tell you that out here we're all behind you. But there's one thing...
Citizens give him the greatest public attention.
Methods from the president...
Power and prestige of the presidency. Giving the strong men who hold this office increasing responsibility. Conferring on this one man